Hey, this is Matt once again. Welcome back to another video. Another paid request this time from Manuel. Thank you so much for that, and for those interested requests in any type of reviews, or re-reviews, or topics, or randomness, or whatever the case may be. Feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. And this is for Watchmen from 2009, which I do like. Overall, I do like the film. I do enjoy the film. It's one of those things where I don't rewatch it a lot because it's such a long movie. And at the end of the day, the ending is bittersweet bummer, as is the case with the comic and all that stuff, because of the story it's portraying. So it's not one I always gear up to rewatch. But as much crap as I give Zack Snyder, I do think Dawn of the Dead remake is his best film. If I'm thinking, this is probably this think of his career. I do like the Owl movie, Legend of the Guardians. I would say that's my second favorite of his. And then if I did a top 3 Zack Snyder, this would be on it. It follows the comic, from what I gather, fairly closely until the third act, where I get why they made the change, because there's this big creature, and it's like, maybe that'd be a bit too. So they did it a bit more. It's weird to say this with Zack Snyder, but a bit more subtle. That wasn't just a bit smaller, which is not usually the case with that guy. Zack Snyder is one of those guys where I don't like a lot of his films, especially comic book DC related. But if he's going to do it, this is more his wheelhouse, not Superman or any of that like. Man of Steel, I do not like at all. Batman v Superman, I do not like at all. Justice League, I do not like at all. Or his cut, I do not like at all. This, it seemed, you know what, for the most part, I'm just going to follow the comic and copy the images almost beat for beat. Granted, at times he utilizes slow motion a lot, bit of that 300 flavor. I don't mind that, but some people may have an issue, and I can understand. I think what makes the film work is it's a very good-looking movie. Even nowadays watching, this is from 2009, it's still a very good-looking movie, with a lot of very stylistic shots, and does a good representation of copying a lot of these panels from the comic. The music may be on the nose for this time period, but at the same time, I think they worked fine enough for the scene, whether it be the sound of silence. The Bob Dylan, the times they are changing for the opening credits, I think was a good fit. And that opening credit scene kind of showcases the intrigue you get from the comic and how Zack Snyder did a nice job recreating that visually. The slow motion, the different heroes of the time periods, and how this time period is so different from ours. It seems fairly similar, but it's so different. This alternate 1985, as it comes to be known, where Richard Nixon is still in office, where we won the Vietnam War, where superheroes or comic book people were real. And then in 1985, the heroes we have Jeffrey Dean Morgan as the comedian. We have Dr. Manhattan. What was the actor's name? I wrote his name down. His Billy Crudup. Billy Crudup as Dr. Manhattan. Patrick Wilson as the new Night Owl. You have Ozzy Ozymandias, who's like the smartest guy on the planet. Silk Spectre, who is the daughter of the older Silk Spectre, where she was played by Carla Gugino. Rorschach, played by the kid from the Bad News Bears, the guy who's Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street, Jetty or Haley from the Elm Street remake, which was fucking awful. I definitely would say, I think a lot of people would say this is Jetty or Haley's best role, best performance. And of course, because of the story, it's such what happens, because you could have done a sequel with Rorschach if you didn't do certain things, but again, I was following a lot of the comic, the story, to be fair. For those who don't know the plot is like this alternate 1985. Nixon's in office. There's talks of possible nuclear war between the Americans and the Russians. Superheroes have kind of been outlawed. So a lot of the folks are retired. Except Rorschach, he's still going to do some business, kick some criminal ass, try to seek justice. Then the comedian Jeffrey D. Morgan, he's been killed, he's been murdered, and Rorschach thinks we're being taken out one by one, and he's investigating how that happened. Silk Spectre and Night Owl. Silk Spectre, she's with Dr. Manhattan, but he's so off the cuff when it comes to his humanity is lessening more and more, to a point he says, why should I save a world that I have no involvement in, that I have no attachment to? And it's one of those films where, let's say, it's a very lengthy movie. I mean, even the theatrical cut is like 2.5, it's almost 3 hours long. But at the same time, it is interesting to live in this alternate world where you see similar things, but then see how different they are. It was also interesting. Like, people forget this seemed like a big deal in the marketing. It didn't make the most money at the box office, but people were like, "Oh my god! Like, what is this?" Like, it felt fresh at that time period regarding superhero movies. Granted, there were R-rated, Blade and Blade 2, among others, The Punisher, both with Dolph Lundgren and Thomas Jane. But with that big of enough budget and grandiose of visuals, it wasn't typical that someone took the risk to say we're going to put all this money to have it be R-rated, where there's explicit sex scenes done in slow motion, to Hallelujah, where the hell the song was. That you don't have people explode and be vaporized. That you don't have some characters that are pure pieces of trash. Like, Jeffrey D. Morgan's character is a completely horrible person. You find out in the opening credits that he killed JFK, at least in this universe, this alternate timeline. That he tried to physically assault the original Silk Spectre. That he was willing to kill with glee and a glimmer of in his eye. I will say that the cast is fairly good. Like I said, Jeffrey D. Morgan sold that well. It was kind of a precursor to being with Negan on The Walking Dead. And I do think Jeffrey D. Morgan's a good actor. I actually wish he played Joel in the Last of Us TV show. I think Jeffrey D. Morgan would have been a good Joel. I know they got Pablo, whoever his name is. Pedro Pascal, not Pablo. Pablo Escobar. They got Pedro Pascal. But I think Jeffrey D. Morgan would have been a better fit. That's just me. But he, like I said, he has a bit of charm to him, even though he's doing vile things. Patrick Wilson, who would later be in the Conjuring films, he does a nice job as Night Owl, who's kind of a... His look is similar to Batman, but his mentality is more friendly, much more friendly. Silk Spectre's definitely a beautiful lady. Even at Matt Frewer, who I remember from Matt's Headroom and The Take Your Beverly Hills with Ken Wall, he's Moloch, this villain who used to go up against Jeff D. Morgan, but there was a point where he was sleeping and Jeffrey Dean came in and said, "Sally, you're the closest friend I got," and he's pouring his heart out, and Matt Frewer's tears just confused. And I was talking about the marketing. I remember the trailer for this being mesmerizing. Like, it's exceptionally well edited trailer, and they had a great piece of music from the Smashing Pumpkins. Because it was a song that was used in Batman and Robin, but much faster tempo. I think that was called "The End Is the Beginning Is the End." But then they did a new version for this, much slower, much moodier, and honestly, to me, much better. It's a much better version of the song. I think this one's called "The Beginning Is the End Is the Beginning." Great song. I don't remember them using the song in the movie, which I thought was a mistake. If they did, I don't remember it. But it's funny, for 3 hours, you think there'd be a lot for me to talk about. Like I said, it was interesting to witness this world and how it's showcased, and the vigilantism is illegal, Rorschach investigating, showing how badass Rorschach is, whether what his you find a bit of his first piece of business with this guy who did stuff to this kid, and he just finds the guy and just blade right into the fucking head as he deserves. Or when he gets tricked and fucked over, and he's dealing with the cops, and he's using his little thing to burn some of them to get the fuck away from me. Or when he gets arrested, he gets in jail, and they're trying, some fool's trying to go up to him, and he beats the shit out of him. It's like, let's get something straight. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. And you believe it, because Jack Haley is selling the intensity, selling that this guy is off his meds, off his rocker, and he's, despite him being smaller than some of these guys, he's definitely much more dangerous. It's like a animal that doesn't want to be caged and will bite your head off if you get near him. And from the throw of the comedian through the window in slow motion, to seeing the smiley face drop and the speck of blood, to Patrick Wells' still Spectre in the prison trying to help Rorschach and fighting people in slow motion. It's one of those films that maybe could have helped with a shorter running time, because there's a lot to take in one go. Maybe some people thought it was a bit sleazy with the slow motion sex scene and all that. But it's one of those things, I mean, like I said, it didn't really bother me too much. Number one, because she's hot. And number two, because I can appreciate a director to a point utilizing style and not being lazy. Because that's the last thing I could say about Watchmen is lazy. It's quite the opposite. And when you watch so many films that are cheapo movies, they just ooze every part of their body of laziness, where either nothing's happening or there's complete mistakes obvious here and there could have been fixed in 5 seconds. Whether watching Captain America 1990 and they're spelling words wrong on the fucking newspaper that they show on screen, or I'm watching films like the Dark Side of Midnight, where nothing happens but a bunch of people and mustaches talking on telephones, and then you watch something like this, you go, wow, this is so nice to see. And like I said, it does a nice job world building, showing the scenes of Vietnam and Dr. Manhattan just easily, like, what would Superman be if he actually did work with the government? He'd be a god. And even to a point that the Vietnamese are literally bowing to Dr. Manhattan. And what if you're a character that's just so above the norm that you just... He's making a machine for Ozymandias, but at the same time, he doesn't quite think like a human anymore. So, for example, he's supposed to be having such a self-spectre, but she finds out that he's duplicated himself to her, but then all this other stuff. And it's like, what the fuck? And it's one of those scenes that feels like it would be a mini series, but you're trying to fit a mini series into movie theater screens, and maybe box office wise, people like, you know what, maybe I'll wait till home video so I can pause, do whatever other stuff, use the restroom, get something to eat. So maybe that's why it didn't make as much money as some people thought it would in theaters. And it definitely wasn't. Maybe some parents thought it was going to be like other super, because it's 2009. By this point, Iron Man had come out, Incredible Hulk had come out, and if parents didn't know anything, and they thought, oh, it's going to be like Batman, and they go in, they see a big old explicit sex scene, and some of this other shit. I can imagine the rude awakening they did. Actually, I thought that'd be hilarious to see that, but. So again, it does have some really well done scenes. Again, the opening montage showing the Minutemen and the World War II winning it, the Japanese, how Japanese losing, and how a take on certain images, the famous shot of the sailor kissing the nurse, but in this universe, it's a lesbian superhero kissing the nurse. And in the background you see that sailor. So it's like really to showcase the audience that it's the same but different. Back to the Future 2, Ultra 1985 type of way. It's still a really long movie, so at times, I mean, I say that, I mean, the Batman is a long movie, but I think this, you're focusing on so many characters, so you have so many subplots happening where you have, again, this whole idea of nuclear war happening. You have moments to just utilize the world building. You have Rorschach's investigation. You got Ozymandias almost being assassinated. You got Silk Spectre trying to deal with Dr. Manhattan. You got Manhattan showcasing his backstory, his origin, how he was created by this experiment. It's a lot of information being loaded to the viewer. Some may say a bit too much, but it definitely keeps it, at least to me, somewhat interesting. And I do think, compared to like Sucker Punch, I think it helps that Zack Snyder doesn't write. And Zack Snyder is just sort of the director. Listen, here are your panels. Here's your pages. Recreate that shot. Recreate that shot. Create that shot. So in a way, an effects visual cinematographer, maybe Zack Snyder's best bet. Less so as a director, if that makes sense. Like I said, the finale is hard to complain because that's the source material. Long story short, too late. Ozymandias has the idea to unite the world, so he's going to kill millions in order to save billions. Because he's like, no matter, as comedian says, and let me get the line here, heroism won't matter with war. Like all the stuff we do, saving people's lives, that don't matter if the higher ups are going to just shoot a nuclear war and have a bit of it between them and billions die. What we do ain't going to matter. So Ozymandias had this plan, set into motion, kill Jeffrey D. Morgan because Jeffrey knew too much. And even for a guy who had killed, at times simply for fun, killed JFK or because he was ordered to, it seemed even too much for him. That's why he went to his enemy Matt Frewer and cried, and it was even too much for him to bear. Although he wasn't telling anybody, so it seemed like he was still going to let it happen anyway, so maybe Ozymandias didn't need to kill him, I don't know. Anyway, if you didn't know the source material, we get to the scene where Night Owl and Rorschach are trying to stop him, and Ozymandias like, what are you talking about? I started 35 minutes ago. So I started before you guys even got here. So there's no way for them to stop it. So lo and behold, 2 cities, chunk of them get destroyed, millions and millions die. But now it's made to look like Dr. Manhattan did it. So now Russia and America have a common foe, they have a common enemy, they're now united. Humanity, the world is at peace because they have a common enemy to deal with, Dr. Manhattan. And then Ozymandias goes, what are you going to do? You don't tell the truth. So these millions will die, and then they'll still go back to nuclear war. Manhattan kind of realizes, whether you like it or not, it worked. Rorschach's like, fuck that. That's bullshit. I don't tell anybody. This is not right. Regardless of your intentions. Regardless. And Dr. Manhattan goes up to Rorschach. Rorschach's like, you don't have to stop me. I think Rorschach by then he knows he's going to die, but he's not going to stand down on his principles. And dies. Not all beats the shit out of Ozymandias, but at the same time, doesn't matter. Dr. Manhattan goes to some other bit of the Doubtful universe. Rorschach's dead. Ozymandias gets away with it. Night Owl and Silk Spectre pretty much go home and twiddle their thumbs. And then you find out that Rorschach wrote a diary and put it somewhere, and maybe eventually this will be revealed. This truth sooner or later. Which then now you're wondering if you're pissed at Rorschach or not, because if that does happen, and it does end with a nuclear war and billions die, does that really justify Rorschach's actions? And maybe that's the whole point of conversation, of who is at the bottom line, right or wrong. Rorschach's principles are right, but at the same time, if it does, with his diary, cause billions of people to die in nuclear war. But on the flip side, the hope is that, well, no, you just talk to the leaders, talk to the governments, and say, just don't do it at all. I would say, you guys so fucking Billy badass, you, Nixon and you go out there with fucking 2 fists and 2 feet, 2 left feet, I don't give a fuck, and you handle your differences. To quote Johnny Witherspoon, you win some, you lose some, but you live to fight another day. Rest in peace, Johnny Witherspoon. That's how more things should be handled. There you go. But it's just not the case here. So yeah, I get it does make it interesting. And of course, it's, like I say, it's based on the comic, so it's not like they made it up on their own. Again, the only thing they changed was that it was some interdimensional being that Ozymandias got to destroy. I thought it actually made more sense that the person he framed was Dr. Manhattan, who was part of the group, because it's still kept within the realms of the set of characters and story. And we had already built up that Dr. Manhattan is so powerful, including his big blue dick that you see half the fucking movie. I said, here's a big blue dick, because he's naked and there's dick and balls and everything running around. Right, he's then using a fucking baseball bat, knock people's heads off. Zack Snyder is one of those guys that I don't know if I would like him as a person. Because I remember reading about how he got into comics. He got into comics because, I ever read those comics, they were pretty boring. But man, Watchmen I really like because there's violence and sex in it. Same with when Batman Begins came out. Man, if I did a Batman, anything could happen in my movie. My Batman could get fucked in prison. He said this shit. People that are making it up, look it up. He said this kind of shit. That's kind of shit. Maybe he doesn't want to act that way now because he's been more famous with money and trying to be more professional. But this is the shit he would say in interviews. Don't believe me? Look it up. With Folgers in your cup. Go ahead, look it up. So, I've heard the Watchmen TV show was fucking garbage and woke as hell. So, didn't see that. I don't know if they'd ever tried to do another. Because, again, a lot of these, you look at the panels and you look at the images, they look fairly accurate side by side. Now, how the deep themes are handled, that's in the eye of the viewer. Some say, well, Zack Snyder couldn't get the emotional gravitas of it. It's more of a spectacle, visual spectacle to view. It just, for me, again, because of that bummer, bittersweet of an ending, it's just hard for me to rewatch it because unless you're John Carpenter's The Thing, which is done so well, and John Carpenter knows how to do that, and you have this question mark that just I could not only deal with but really enjoy. Just people like John Carpenter have a hand in that. That type of is just not usually my thing. I don't like that Rorschach dies. That still pisses me off to this day. And that's still like, because he's the best character in the movie, in my opinion. And the fact he dies, like, fuck, man. But I do think it's definitely one of Zack Snyder's best movies. It's definitely well made on a visual sense. The effects, I think the musical choices, again, some may say is a bit too on the nose. I thought they worked for what it's portraying. It's still interesting to see such a big budget movie not hold back in terms of sex and violence. It did not neuter itself. I can appreciate a studio taking the risk on that. It's few and far in between of rareness, especially nowadays. And even then, it still feels refreshing compared to the countless superhero films you see today. This still feels refreshing. And I can see why it gets high scores in IMDb, among other stuff. And like I said, it's a film that it was interesting to watch again. And overall, I do like. So with that said, sorry for my mumblings and rumblings and fumblings, but we will see you later. Bye-bye.